It could be the end of an era in Tampa Bay as Mike Evans may be in his final season with the Buccaneers. Mike Evans, ever since he came out of Texas A&M, propping up Johnny Manziel's career, has been a stud, a future Hall of Famer, and a Super Bowl champion thanks to Tom Brady ending up in Tampa just a couple years ago. Now, as we look towards the Baker Mayfield era, it may be all crashing down on him as Todd Bowles may be in his final season too. September 9th is the imaginary deadline that Evans set for the Bucs to resolve a contract extension. What do you think of kind of Tampa Bay moving forward, especially if Mike Evans is no longer part of this team?
If Mike Evans hits the open market, that would be interesting because I don't even know what a 30-something-year-old Mike Evans. It would be like Keenan Allen hitting the market at this point. It's like, what would happen to that reliable receiver who you knew you always wanted to keep on your team? It would be so strange. But Mike Evans at this point is about to be in limbo. And I think that's a perfect analogy for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going forward at this point, is that like Mike Evans could get extended because Tampa Bay's decided we want to keep this core together and bring them along, or this season could go poorly and they look up and say, we are ready to tear this thing to the ground. We're ready to rebuild it, or maybe retool the plane in the sky, depending on how they want to go about it. And you could see Devin White get traded. You could see Mike Evans leave in free agency or potentially get traded at the trade deadline if things go really sour really quickly. I think Tampa Bay is kind of in that limbo where they're saying, we want to see how this season goes before we decide if we're going to commit to anybody long-term. I mean, they've already committed to Chris Godwin long-term, which different time in the franchise. Godwin was obviously on the franchise tag and Tom Brady was pounding his fists on the table and saying you need to bring back Chris Godwin. And so they brought back Chris Godwin. You have obviously Ndamukong Suh, who's gone, Vita Vea, who's extended long-term. And then they have these two situations hanging over them with Devin White and Mike Evans, who between the two of them, we could estimate what they'll make about 37 million per year between the two of them. Maybe Devin White gets 20 something million. Mike Evans gets 17 to 20 million, somewhere around that territory. They're about to decide on whether they want to make a $40 million commitment for the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. And I think that's all going to be predicated on what the direction of the franchise is going. And I think they're in a wait and see approach, which is why they didn't extend Devin White and why they haven't extended Mike Evans yet. They are in a very wait and see approach to see just how bad the season goes, or maybe if they make it to the playoffs.
So when we talked about Baker Mayfield a couple weeks ago, both of us were very pessimistic on him. Now, that was before we saw Baker Mayfield take a single snap in a Tampa Bay Buccaneers uniform. He did play preseason, and he did look pretty good. He had his moments in those games where I actually was pretty impressed. And we know Baker Mayfield has had such an up and down career, his time in the NFL. It started with that amazing rookie season. Then the Freddie Kitchens year happened. Year 3 was great the first year under Stefanski, but then again, year 4 happened, and now here we are in Tampa. What do you think that Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans' connection will be? Do you think that he'll be the primary threat, or do you think that Baker's play style would favor Chris Godwin a little bit better?
Fantasy football experts are torn between this right now because they're kind of projecting Evans and Godwin to have very similar stats this year. So I think they don't really know exactly which direction that's going to go for the Buccaneers. And obviously health is a big factor with both of those receivers being Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Evans now being in his 30s with some prior injury concerns. Godwin's obviously had the torn ACL 2 years ago. So I think that's probably one of the primary concerns there is health will dictate the need for the Bucs. That could also include health for Baker Mayfield, but this is Mike Evans, man. Mike Evans has had 4,000 or 5,000 yard seasons in his career. You mentioned Hall of Fame, and I used to be on the Mike Evans Hall of Fame. Like, of course he'll make it. I think his odds are not as good as I originally thought they were to make the Hall of Fame, but still one of the best receivers of his era, playing his entire career as the number one receiver in Tampa Bay. Him and Keenan Allen are very similar in that respect. I know I compared them earlier, but just always consistently someone who's going to get 1,000 yards and someone who you know is capable of breaking off for a 50-yard touchdown at any given point. Obviously, Evans is a bit older now, and Tampa Bay, even though they were in the playoffs last year. It's been a little bit since Tampa Bay's been playing competitive football. And so I think we've kind of forgotten about Mike Evans at a certain extent. Certainly I forgot that he was 1 year away from reaching free agency and was needing a new contract. But I think that the Baker Mayfield Mike Evans connection is going to be the best on the team. And that's the best I can say. That doesn't necessarily mean it'll be good or bad. I think it'll be the best connection on the team because of how good Mike Evans is.
I mean, before Brady got there, Evans was getting it done with instability at the quarterback position. Of course, that was also a younger Mike Evans, but with Jameis there and Ryan Fitzpatrick, Evans was still posting monster stat lines. And, you know, the thing that people will always talk about with Mike Evans is the consistency, the consistently being over 1,000 yards as a wide receiver, which is as impressive, you know, like when we think about like Mike Tomlin's never having a losing season stat. I think the ring separates him. I think the ring puts him fully in the Hall of Fame. So again, if you're Mike Evans, you're thanking your lucky stars that Tom Brady just said, you know what? San Francisco doesn't want me, so I guess I'm just going to go to Tampa. And that's changed the course of potentially Mike Evans wearing a gold jacket or not. If it is his last year, I mean, I fully expect Evans to have a baller stat line. And if you're Baker or Kyle Trask or whoever ends up playing significant snaps at quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you're going to look at just the marvel of a man that is Mike Evans. I mean, let's face it, this guy's 6'5", 6'6". He's a huge guy. You throw that guy's direction, he's going to come down with more balls than he's not. So just use the talent at your disposal. We'll see if the offense is a little bit better this year than it was last year. Obviously, we know last year it was stagnant as hell. And that could also be because of the injuries on the offensive line. If they're a little bit healthier this year than they were last year, maybe that could help things out. I mean, not that I'm going to at all like put Baker Mayfield near Tom Brady's tier, but I guess if you would say things that Baker does have over Brady, he is a little bit more mobile for what it's worth. And that might be able to help him in that offense. And if he can, again, just find the Baker Mayfield of old, find that confidence, whatever the chip on his shoulder that he needs to be able to succeed, then again, Evans, Godwin, it's one of the best wide receiving combinations you have in football. Like, you're not going to find too many better wide receiving combos than those two together. They're still a top 10 wide receiving duo. If you're the Buccaneers, obviously you want to retain Evans as much as you can. He's the type of player you want to make a lifelong Buccaneer. But at the same time, it's like if they do enter this full rebuild mode, which is going to hinge a lot on the quarterback play, it's going to hinge a lot on the head coaching, because again, I'm not even sold on Bowles. Like, what does it say about Bowles that, you know, his first head coaching tenure with the Jets, we know it was awful. Then he gets his chance last year with Tampa Bay, and again, average, propped up by the fact you had Tom Brady on that team. Like, if they have another bad year, I think Bowles is done over there in Tampa.
Yeah, and that's part of the limbo situation, right? Is they don't know about Devin White, they don't know about Mike Evans, and they don't know about the head coach. And that'll be the decision they make going forward is, do we strike while the iron's hot and trade Mike Evans to the Cowboys or something? Or do we strike while the iron's hot and trade Devin White to the, I don't know, say the Titans or something? Like, that's the conversation that they're having at this point in their head. And I also didn't realize, I just looked up the stats for sure. Mike Evans has played 9 seasons in the NFL. He has had 9 1,000-yard seasons. Mike Evans has had 1,000 yards every year of his career, whether he's been injured, whether he has a down year, a good year, a bad quarterback, a good quarterback, Jameis Winston, Blaine Gabbert, or Tom Brady. 1,000 yards every single season of Mike Evans' career, which is really impressive. His career high was 1,524 during one of those Jameis Winston seasons. Or I guess that was the Fitzpatrick Winston season was the year that he had all that. Was the year that, like, they were going back and forth between the quarterbacks. But Mike Evans has been incredible for all of these years of his career. And I would love to see him go play for a contender at the back end of his career, because I know how much of an impact he could. Imagine if Mike Evans was your number 2 receiver, and you could argue like one of those years Godwin was the 1 on the Bucks, but imagine if you're a team like Cincinnati and you have Mike Evans as your number 2. Imagine if you're a team like Buffalo that has Mike Evans as your number 2.
Well, yes, but I mean, part of the issue here too, and why they're talking about extension, is Mike Evans, whatever his season ends up becoming, he's not going to be cheap next season. So whatever team gets him, it is going to be a team that has some cap space to throw around. I know Cincinnati, they're struggling to even figure out what they want to do with T. Higgins moving forward. I don't know, like if the Chargers have any cap space to throw around. The Chiefs, they always seem to find cap space. We'll see. But yeah, Mike Evans, it's going to be hard to put him as a number 2 unless for some reason his contract numbers take a little bit of a hit this year, which I think he's angling towards being on the high end of the wide receiver pay spectrum.
And we know that he's a big Dallas Cowboys guy. He's been connected every time his name comes up to the Cowboys. And Dallas doesn't necessarily have the financial flexibility, but they do have a gaping hole as a second wide receiver apart from CeeDee Lamb. No disrespect.
Stop disrespecting Brandon Cooks. Stop disrespecting him. Come on, look at those stats.
He's no Mike Evans. My Brandon Cooks is no Mike Evans. And
he's fast. He's faster than Evans for what it's worth.
You know what Mike Evans is? Big. Mike Evans is big and can run, and he can beat you deep and in the short field. Mike Evans is amazing as a receiver. But yeah, Dallas would be a team that makes a lot of sense. Jerry Jones is the old guy who makes a trades on whims at any situation. So that would be a possibility for them. Obviously, they just got rid of Amari Cooper because he was too expensive. So Lord knows how much they would pay Mike Evans in addition to CeeDee Lamb's contract now coming up at this point. So maybe it's not as probable as one might expect. Maybe Mike Evans will get a little bit less than maybe Mike Evans was anticipating. But I mean, Tampa is just in a really interesting position here. Is he one of those pieces that jumpstarts a rebuild, or do they franchise tag him? Do they even let him walk in free agency? There's a lot of different scenarios here that I don't quite know how it will play out for the Buccaneers.
You know what I would do? Play this game of finding like someone on a rookie contract and figuring out which team would want to go after him. Does Jacksonville have some cap space if Evans becomes available?
I guess so. And it's not that far from Tampa. So it's in the realm of possibility. One team that I think would be really interesting, and I don't know if Evans would want to go there, and I don't know how it would work out, but Green Bay Packers would be interesting. If you put him with Christian Watson as the 1 and 2 with Jordan Love, I think that would be really interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, if Jordan Love's any good, certainly that would be something that the Packers should consider, but we know the Packers aren't exactly known for spending free agent dollars, so we'll see if that's even something that organization would do.
Jonathan Taylor game. They were trying to trade for Jonathan Taylor.
So they say. I don't believe it, honestly. Like, I'm not buying it, but they were probably, we'll trade for Jonathan Taylor, but we'll give you a 7th round pick. That's probably the extent of negotiating that Gutekunst and them were doing.
Maybe so. If Mike Evans hits free agency, how about if he ended up going to his bitter rival, the New Orleans Saints? Him alongside Chris Olave in the wide receiver room. I mean, it's a good match. I just don't know if he's exactly on the best of terms with those guys in New Orleans after multiple times he's fought them over the years.
I guess, what would Evans' free agent priority be? Obviously, he already has 1 ring for his legacy from Tom Brady. Is it just make as much money as you possibly can? Because in those situations, he could just end up on a weird team. He could pull the DeAndre Hopkins and end up in Tennessee.
Yeah, and in that scenario, the teams that will have the most money next year are the Cardinals, the Colts, the Chicago Bears.
Ooh, Cardinals are actually kind of interesting when you think about it. Let's say they do end up with Caleb Williams. Well, hey, I have a guy on a rookie contract. Why don't we just spend some money? Now, that's up to the Bidwells, but still.
That would also mean Hollywood Brown would leave because Hollywood Brown's a free agent after this season too. So it would be like trading out that money for Mike Evans. That might not be the worst idea in the world to make the upgrade from Marquise Hollywood Brown to Mike Evans if you're going to move on from the whole Kyler Murray era. So that could be a possibility there. I think Kansas City's actually one of the teams that will have one of the highest cap situations going into next year. So maybe even Kansas City, but I know they've been reluctant to spend big money on wide receivers in the past. So maybe that's not a match made in heaven, but Kansas City's going to actually have a lot of money next season.
Obviously, a lot's going to depend on Mike Evans' health, but 1,000 yards again, what do you think?
Let's say, yeah, I'm not going to bet against Mike Evans. Let's make it 10 years in a row, 10 consecutive seasons.
So wait, I should ask you, is he already over the 10,000 yard mark as a whole? You mentioned the 9 straight with 1,000.
Yeah, he's already over 10,000 yards.
Okay, so just again, stat padding, keep compiling to that Hall of Fame legacy. A little bit like Frank Gore, the wide receiver position. So, but hey, at the end of the day, we're gonna look at Mike Evans' career stat line, and it's gonna be like among the top leaders in yards all time, and we're gonna be like, damn, Mike Evans was really good, wasn't he? Just throw on some old tape, just see
I
Mike
already
Evans just
feel like
dunking on. Yeah, just see Mike Evans dunking on guys. Again, I think in a year that we got a Johnny Manziel documentary, it's more impressive to think about, oh yeah, Mike Evans was really good and on that Texas A&M team that propped up Manziel.
Yeah, I think the thing that works against him, he's only been all pro one time in his career. So like even though he's had 9 1,000 yard seasons, I think only 3 of them he had more than 1,200, which
But
sucks. But
okay, well, like with things like that, you always have to consider like who's top of the position at any particular time. Like Devontae was there, Antonio Brown. I think Evans came in probably back end. Calvin Johnson still.
yeah,
Julio Jones existed. Julio Jones in his prime, which was a bad man. You want to talk about a big guy that was also fast? Julio Jones, all pro. Yeah.
yeah,
So
Hall of Famer for sure. So and Mike Evans, that's the interesting conversation. It's why I keep using Keenan Allen as the comparison, because for years I always joked Mike Evans is wide receiver 7 every year. In his fantasy drafts, in his stat production, he's wide receiver 7 in the NFL. He has always been wide receiver 7 for like 10 straight years. And so do you reward the longevity of consistently being very, very good with a nod into the Hall of Fame? Because I looked up his Wikipedia. The 9 consecutive seasons of 1,000 yards to start a career, that's an NFL record.
yeah,
No wide receiver in the history of the NFL has ever had that many 1,000 yard
and I would
seasons.
question like how many wide receivers that have 10,000 yards in their career are not in the Hall of Fame. That would also
That's a
be
good
worth a
question.
discussion. Like again, it's like when people bring up is Frank Gore a Hall of Famer or not. I think it's hard to deny a guy who's literally top 3 in a rushing category in a positive direction like Frank Gore is. I think Evans with again just that 10,000 yard mark and a Super Bowl ring. I mean, come on, it's going to be hard for anyone to not keep that guy out for him to be denied.
So there's a few here that are in the 10,000 yard category that aren't in the Hall of Fame. So for reference, Mike Evans is 45th all time in receiving yards as things stand right now. So if he retired tomorrow, which obviously he's got more time left in his career, but this would be some of the names that he would be compared with: Chad Ochocinco, Joe Alloway, Robbie White, Stanley Morgan, Keyshawn Johnson, and AJ Green. Those are the names right now. Now, if he gets up to 13,000 yards for his career, that's when he gets into kind of the like fringe Hall of Fame territory with guys like Andre Reed, who obviously made the Hall of Fame, but it took him a little bit to get in the Hall of Fame. Jason Witten, he'll be kind of in the same situation. We'll get into the Hall of Fame, but it's going to take a minute for him to get into the Hall of Fame. Charlie Joyner, Hines Ward, who's obviously not in the Hall of Fame, but he's knocking on the door every single year to potentially get in the Hall of Fame. Antonio Gates, who will maybe get in the Hall of Fame in his first try, maybe won't. We'll see what happens there. That's kind of the territory that he got. Oh, also Jackson is in that same group at the 12,000 receiving yard marker. So if Mike Evans plays 4 more seasons, averaging 750 yards a season, then he will be right on the edge of the Hall of Fame, I think.
Join in on the discussion, whether it be Mike Evans' Hall of Fame legacy, will he, won't he make the Hall, or whether it be what his situation is going to be in Tampa moving forward. Will he be a lifelong Buck? Will he be donning the creamsicle jerseys for the rest of his career? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias, and we will see you next time.